Hello, I'm Milton Chang of Bonsai Heirloom. Today we're going to work on this Cork black pine, Japanese black pine. I think it's easily over 75 years old. And the reason is that I have kept a cork pine for about 40 years, and it was no more bigger than this. And you can see the size of this one, and I'll take a couple close-up to show the corking. It's really quite incredible. There are several reasons you want to repot a plant. One is that it's root-bound, so that you want to renovate the roots so that the tree will be healthy, stay healthy. And the second issue is that when you play with the tree, you begin to see certain angle you prefer. And therefore, you may want to turn it, twist it, or do something when you repot it so that it will come out to your liking, as well as change your pot. So for example, this pot, I think most trees, people tend to emphasize the size of the pot to be small. I tend to go a little bit larger size during the growing cycle. But then of course, for display, you want to do it exactly right. I think the problem with this tree and this pot, a lot of the old trees are not playing the right material, not soil mixture. And it's very hard to remove the soil. Now, what I do is I always remove most of the soil because I prefer to use my type of soil so that it's easy to maintain, in a sense of knowing exactly what's in it. I must confess, I bought quite a few trees in the last, call it 6 months, and I must have killed at least 5 old trees. And I finally wise up not to remove too much of the roots all at once, because a lot of these are so root-bound, it's basically like a lump of rock. And if you try to get rid of it, you'll wind up destroying the fibrous roots and just not enough to support the tree. So today, we'll take it out of the pot to see how much we need to remove, but I will certainly be much more cautious, maybe renovate it slowly rather than doing it all at once. I'll go over the material I'll be using today. First of all, the soil mix, I'll talk more about it. There's the sandy loam, which I got from my farm. That's rated as prime agricultural land. And then this is peat moss, which you can get at Home Depot. And these are the perlite. I think these perlite are a little bit small. I think I should have gotten more coarse ones, but it's okay because they will degrade in about 10 years, and I think I'll be repotting it before then. And this is a perlite. Perlite is used to absorb a lot of water, and I will not be using it today, but will be using it in the future for water-loving plants such as maple and elms. Okay, now the tools. This is a clipper that actually is used for grape harvester in the vineyards. That's very sharp, it's stainless steel, and this is a very useful tool to clean off the cuttings the trunks that you cut off. And this is a lopper, a garden lopper. Again, quite inexpensive. You can get a lot of tools from AliExpress or Tmall nowadays, directly from China, or else you can just, for convenience, go to Amazon. And this is just a regular, inexpensive Tramontino, which is a very common kitchen tool brand, steak knife. And that's for cutting around the pot to get the tree out. And this is probably one of the most useful tools, which is a hook to remove the soil from the roots. Most people use this anodized aluminum for wiring. I actually rarely use wiring because I think that the way to create trees that are most natural looking is to, when they grow, the branches get heavy and it droops. And so that's really like pulling it down with something. And so you can use this as a guide wire, more or less, to pull it down, or use old electrical wire, and I'll show you how to do that later. Or for that matter, these are called training wire in the garden, which is steel wire coated with plastic. Now today, I will also use this tool, which is a nozzle, to spray the bottom of the roots to get rid of the old soil. And I'll talk more about that later. And finally, I do something a little bit unusual. This is a fiberglass window screen. This is slightly heavier than the normal ones used for mosquito outside of your window because this is stronger, it's more for pets. But either one will work. And what I do is I actually line a piece at the bottom of the pot to prevent it from the roots from curling around, which very few people do. In the nursery trade, that is called root pruning. With that then, let's now look at the tree that we're going to tackle today. So you can see there's a lot of corking. The amount of corking is really quite incredible. And that's what makes this tree very desirable. Like almost all of the cork pine, they are grafted on regular black pine, and you try to find trees that the bottom kind of rhymes with the top so that it's not like a big disjoint. Okay, with that in mind then, let me dig into the tree. Two things we need to do with this tree. It's customary that people tie the tree to the pot. I actually do not very much of that because you rarely tip the plant over. I guess sometimes the big wind can blow it over, but rarely. So if you worry about it, you can tie it a little bit external or something, but I don't particularly like to gird the roots. So let me show you what happens here. You can see they always have something in the bottom to hold the tree down. And usually they are done with copper wire, so you can cut it with the tools that you have without going back to the sharp tools. In this case, it's copper or aluminum. In this case, it's copper. So now the tree is basically loose. I can pull it out. There's nothing holding it back. If you want to do that, that's fine, but you don't necessarily have to. And of course, one of the way you tell if you're a good pot or not is the number of stamps. In this case, there are 2 stamps, means the guy's very pleased with it, and he put 2 of his stamps on it. So again, this is just a household knife. So I'm going to work around this tree and try to cut around it so that the tree can easily pop out of the pot because it's so tight, it's holding on to the pot itself. But it shouldn't be difficult to get it out because the pot is tapered. It's bigger in the top than the bottom, so which means it's easy to come out. And I can see I'm cutting into very hard stuff. I think the akadame and decomposed granite and stuff like that. So this tree is not going to be easy to get rid of the soil to repot, but we'll see what we come upon. Another good tool to use is actually in the construction trade they use called the jab saw for cutting sheetrock. Those are pretty sharp and pretty long, so you can reach down there to release the pot. Look at that, they're just big rocks and stuff. Okay, with that then, I'll probably just tip it. Oh, see, it's not even budging. It's that tight. It's totally root bound. Well, we struggled to get the plant or the tree out of the pot. And actually in the process, I used a saw to cut around the block. But you can see the bottom is still a very large root. That's what is known as root bound because it's all wrapped around the sides and the bottom, and you want to cut them all off. So now you can see I hose off all of the previous mix, which is comprised of actually surprisingly so rock pebbles and akadama, presumably to increase drainage. When I cut off all the sides and the bottom, that got rid of the root bound, and so what's remaining are mostly fibrous roots. And so I cut off some of the major roots. The rest of it is really good. This is going to be a healthy tree, easy to stay alive. You see, this is all actually pebbles or akadama, big akadama. So this is the tree. Now we are ready to try to see it will fit into what kind of pot. Conceptually, I have picked the round pot that I want to put it in. So after the roots were hosed down to get to more of the fibrous roots, I cut off all of the areas around the tree to fit the pot. And it's quite all right because it's the fibrous roots that keep the tree alive. Okay, so here's the tree. I think I like to create a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest. So I'll probably try to push this down gradually over time so that it will become more of a twist up here and going that way. With cork pine, it's very tricky because you don't want to break the cork. So, and to find the right pot, you have to try and error because your visualization may not always be correct. So for example, I visualized this drum pot to be a good one because I like it round more than rectangular. So let's see, this one works. It's bigger, but also deeper. I think this tree will look really nice in that shallow pot, much better than before. Now, if I can tilt this forward a little bit and also bend it forward a little bit in time, it will create a little bit more depth. Right now, it's really more or less one plane. Very little, mostly towards that side, nothing towards the front. But that's a long-term project. What I'm gonna do now is to put a fiberglass mesh underneath the pot that's slightly extended to the side so that to prevent the roots from going through it straight, because the mesh will break up the roots to make it fibrous up on top of the soil and the bottom will curl up a little bit. And that's known as a root cutting, which is what some landscaping nurserymen use to grow them in bags to sell trees that grow better in the soil. Now let me go over briefly the principle of the soil mix. There's a lot of misinformation about soil mix in the media, and all of them are correct because they work for the individual that's proposing what you use. But if you follow blindly, it really doesn't work for you. I've killed many trees in my early days by following blindly what other people say. The understanding I finally have is the following, very simple, and I think any houseplant folks would tell you the following the same. That is, a tree needs several components. One is the soil, to hold the roots, to hold the plant in place. And so if you're hydroponic in a controlled environment, you don't need the soil. And the second thing you need is air. Air can be supplied by porous medium, such as peat moss and perlite. And then you need water, something to retain water over a period. And you can use perlite and sphagnum moss from Canada, or sometimes you add vermiculite for trees that particularly like moisture, such as Japanese maple or elm. Black pine, it actually needs more aeration, so therefore I will add a little bit more perlite. So the normal mixture I use for almost every tree is, without question, just don't even think about it, is use sandy loam, one part perlite, and 1 part peat moss. And for maple, I add half a part of vermiculite. And for pine tree, I actually put in 2 parts perlite instead of 1, because this gives me assurance there's a lot more air. Now, when I first transplant the tree, I put no fertilizer in the mix because I don't want the fragile new roots get damaged by too much nitrogen or something like that. Then I follow by bi-weekly liquid fertilizer that I've chose, and the trees grow extremely well once they're established. In fact, phenomenally fast. The point about bonsai tree is not to keep the bonsai tree small or stunted, but rather keep it growing fast, to give you a lot of opportunity to prune it, to shape it. And you keep it small by pruning and shaping it. So this is what I do with this one, and I already pre-mixed the soil using 1 part sandy loam from my farm, which is very good drainage, and then 1 part perlite, in this case, 2 parts perlite, 1 part sphagnum moss, and that's it. And I put it in right away. Now, one advantage of this soil mix, it's very inexpensive. You can get it in your local supplier. Second advantage is that it takes no time at all to change the soil, to repot, because it takes 5 minutes to wash off the sand. Nothing sticks to it because they're all very granular. And so that's another advantage. So that's what I do now. I standardize this on every tree. So first of all, I put enough in the bottom so that the bottom of the tree will have enough mix. And I use this garbage bag. It's slightly thicker than the regular garbage bag, so it doesn't break. And what I do is I just shake it, and that mixes it really, really well. Half a dozen shake, and you're done with mixing. And then I try to break up the pieces of soil that's clumped together to make it more uniform. And that doesn't matter either, because the grain will absorb water differently to keep the moisture over a longer period. So trees are very forgiving after they live in the wild for millions of years, so long as you provide the basic ingredients I need. And one other question that often comes up, do I put it in the sun or shade? Light is what gives it photolysis, therefore it needs light. And some trees, houseplants, may require less light. Even that, most of them will enjoy more lights. I recommend the best you have is morning sunlight, because it's not really hot and it's got enough light in it, and it doesn't dry out the tree as much. On the other hand, most trees, especially like pine, grows very well in full sun. In fact, hot summer days are great for it. But if you do that, then you have to water it more frequently. So to make my soil mix discussion more complete, let me say the following. The soil mixer that I recommend, 1 part, 1 part, 1 part, in this case, 2 parts perlite, I think you can safely water, let's say, twice a week and be very safe with the tree, even maybe once a week. But on the other hand, I found watering bonsai is a very nurturing sense of feeling that you're doing something good for the tree. Therefore, it's very relaxing. In fact, that to me, that's one of the stress relieving elements when business was tough. And so considering water more once a day, minimally once a week, maybe every 3 days, maybe the optimum, twice a week. Make it a routine so you won't forget. Now I put a layer of soil in the bottom about this thick. Now I can put the tree on top, because you can see that there are a lot of roots that are sticking out, which will grow right into the tree. And so let me just put it in. So what I do is that the soil is very soft right now. So what I do is I kind of wiggle the tree so it goes down into the soil a little bit. But the soil is dry at this point. So what I do is to put some water in it. You can see it's a generous amount of water that makes the soil very soft and viscous. It can move around. Instead of the old-fashioned way, they tell you to poke it with a chopstick. That actually can cut the roots, which to me is not very good. But instead, I just push it underneath the soil. The soil is here, and I push it into the middle. You see, it's very easy to move because it's wet. And I push it as hard as I can into the middle. So what I would do is continue to add soil around it and continue to push it under so that the bottom of the pot is filled with soil. And you keep doing that, and you can see quite a bit of soil can go in. So you continue to push the soil in so that the bottom doesn't have any voids if you can help it. Although if you have little voids, it doesn't really matter. The roots will go to areas where they are in contact, and it will avoid the areas that's a hole. But you try to avoid as much hole as you can, okay? So let me keep adding the soil. So this tree is more or less done. So let me talk a little bit about the caring of the bonsai. And to start with saying the varieties of black pine, Japanese black pine. It is particularly desirable because the trees can reduce in leaf size and can get quite dense, and it's quite hardy. Also, it's very traditional. There are basically, I would say, 4 basic kinds of Japanese black pine. One is a seedling that's of unknown origin, and you can buy them as black pine. And those trees don't necessarily have rough bark. They have not smooth, but neither have barks that will fissure, like the Arakawa. The one desirable variety is called Mikawa. The nice thing about that is that the black pine generally do not shoot out where there's no green. That means when you cut a branch, you have to leave some green behind it so that it will pop out. Otherwise, if you cut it without the green, that branch would die off. But Mikawa sometimes will, out of randomness, other parts will pop out. So give you more opportunity for shaping the tree because they give you more branching. And so that's one advantage of Mikawa. Then the other kind is called Arakawa, which is it's a part in Tokyo. And Mikawa actually means deer island, so I presume it's in an island. It has very deep fissure in a sense that the bark will break up into nice lines. And that's very desirable for old bonsai as they get older. And then the third kind or fourth kind is this one, which is called Nishiki pine, which is cork pine. Theoretically, according to Japanese books, that can be propagated by cutting, although the yield is very, very low. Only very few percentage will make it. And so most of them are grafted, and it's becoming quite acceptable. There's an ugly graft mark where this is the original black pine, and then that's the corking starts. But that's considered a very good corking because it doesn't look like totally out of place. Sometimes it's a stake and then cork. So when you prune this, I don't advocate wiring because they are very fragile. I'd rather do a little bit of banding because it actually quite supple, can follow your banding. And also by cutting, again, you cut it so there's some green below so they will branch out to make it more dense. So that's what I'll do to this tree to make it look like a very full tree in time. Again, given there's so much roots, very fortunately, this tree probably has been repotted every 5 years so that the root bound is at the bottom. When I cut it off, the rest of the roots is pretty fibrous. So there's no reason why this tree will not survive and grow healthily. And you can see there's a lot of candles here. And I will show you the progress every 6 months or 3 months so that you can follow its development. Hopefully it becomes a 100-year-old tree and then we can all celebrate. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Acknowledge that you like this video so I can get more audience. And do visit us from time to time. And we'll also sign up for our announcements that will notify you when we have new video. I intend to do several videos a month so that we can keep in touch. So thank you very much.